My name is Hannah. I'm 37 years old, and I've been with the same man for 15 of them. It's hard to admit this, but sometimes I catch myself looking in the mirror and not recognizing the woman staring back. Not because I've aged, though, sure, there are lines around my eyes that weren't there before, but because she seems smaller somehow. Dimmed. Like someone turned down the brightness on who I used to be. The hardest part? I can't quite pinpoint when it started. I've been chewing on this for months, maybe years. And I know I sound like one of those women in sad essays you scroll past at midnight, the ones whispering about things they can't say out loud. But the truth is, I think I've been whispering my entire adult life. I grew up in a house where silence was its own language. My father, especially, he was a master of not saying things. He never raised his voice. Never admitted anything. But I could always feel what he wasn't saying. And I knew, even before my mother did, that something wasn't right. I saw the way his eyes lingered a little too long on his phone. The way he became suddenly tired after dinner. The way he hugged her like he was already halfway out the door. We never spoke about it. Not once. But we both knew. And now, I'm terrified I've become my mother. When I first met Sam, it was the kind of love you dream about, that quick, electricity in your fingertips kind of thing. He was funny and warm and confident in a way I found intoxicating. I remember the first night we slept together, not even for the sex itself, but for how he looked at me afterward. Like I was rare. Like he couldn't believe his luck. He reached over and tucked a piece of my hair behind my ear and whispered, "You feel like home." I still think about that sometimes. How I felt in his arms. How warm and full and seen I felt. Now? Last week he kissed me goodbye before heading to the gym. His lips brushed mine, but it was automatic, like checking the mailbox or turning off the stove. I stood in the doorway after he left, touching my mouth like I'd just been grazed by a stranger. Some nights we still cuddle on the couch. His arm around me. My head against his chest. But the silence feels heavier now. We don't talk about anything real. Just logistics. Groceries. Work schedules. Who forgot to call the plumber? I don't know when our affection turned into habit. When his hand on my thigh stopped meaning want and started meaning obligation. I feel like I'm always squinting at him, trying to see if I'm imagining it, the pulling away, the distracted glances at his phone, the slight delay when I say, "I love you." Like he has to remember to say it back. There was a moment, I can't stop going back to it, a stupid little thing, really. We were out at dinner for our anniversary. 13 years. I wore a red dress he used to love. I curled my hair, did my makeup, tried to summon the version of me he used to see. The one who could make him pause mid-sentence just to kiss her. We sat across from each other in a candlelit booth. I reached for his hand across the table. He took it, but barely looked up from his phone. Just murmured something about work and kept scrolling. I smiled anyway, tried to act like it didn't sting. But in that moment, holding his distracted hand in mine, something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage. Or heartbreak. It was something softer. Quieter. A sense that I was slipping, not out of love, necessarily, but out of reach. And the worst part? He didn't notice. That was the exact moment I realized something had changed. Not just between us, but in me. Some part of me that had spent years stretching to hold us together, to forgive the distance, to explain away the coldness, to keep believing in what we used to be, had finally snapped. And just like when I was a little girl, watching my dad pretend everything was fine. I knew. Even if we never said it out loud. Sam always thinks touch will fix things. He'll run his hand along my spine when I'm tense, press soft kisses against my neck while I'm washing dishes, wrap his arms around me in bed even after an argument. And for years, I let that be enough. Or at least I pretended it was. But now, every time he reaches for me, something stiffens in my chest. The truth is, I'm starving, but not for sex. Not for his hands. I want to be understood. I want to be heard. I want him to look at me and ask what's wrong instead of assuming a kiss can melt it away. He's a high school history teacher. Patient in a way I never could be. His students love him, they bake him cookies, write him thank you notes. He's the kind of guy who knows exactly how to explain the Cold War but completely misses the moment his wife is emotionally unraveling in front of him. Last Tuesday was a perfect example. I was running late to work, trying to finish an article while also hunting for a clean blouse, when I found one of his t-shirts, crumpled and sweaty, tossed on top of the laundry I'd already folded the night before. I called out to him, frustrated, asking again if he could just be more mindful. He wandered in, shirtless, sipping coffee, and said with a shrug, "You're always stressed." It's not about the shirt. That stopped me cold. He wasn't wrong. I am always stressed. But instead of asking why, instead of helping, he reduced me to a mood. A pattern. Something to endure. Then, because it's what he does, he came over, placed his hands on my waist, and pulled me in like it was a dance. His chest against mine. That familiar scent of coffee and cologne. He kissed my cheek, whispered, "Don't let a shirt ruin your morning." I stood stiff in his arms. Didn't kiss him back. He pulled away, confused. Hurt, even. "Come on, Hannah. Don't do this." I wanted to scream, "Do what?" Ask to be seen? But instead, I gave a weak smile and nodded. You're right. Because if I told the truth, that I felt invisible, touch-starved in all the ways that didn't involve skin, I didn't think he'd know what to do with that. And the irony? Later that night, he tried again. We'd barely spoken all evening. I curled up on the couch with my laptop, trying to finish edits. He sat beside me and nudged my arm with his nose, boyish and playful. Then he kissed my shoulder, trailed his fingers up my thigh. I flinched. He stopped. Seriously? I closed my laptop. Took a breath. Sam, I can't flip a switch like that. He leaned back, sighing. It's like you don't want me anymore. The thing is, I do. I want him so much it aches. But I want more than his hands. I want the version of him who used to ask me questions just to know me better. The man who'd lie beside me for hours talking about everything and nothing. Now, it feels like all we have left is muscle memory. He doesn't get that for me. Intimacy is built in the quiet moments. In vulnerability. In trust. Not just friction and pressure and kisses in the dark. So I didn't answer. I just stood up and went to bed alone. The next morning, he brought me coffee in bed. My favorite mug. Almond milk. 2 sugars. He didn't say sorry. He didn't ask how I slept. Just set it down and left for work. And I sat there, holding the warm cup in my hands, wondering how we got here, speaking different languages under the same roof. There's this thing my dad used to do after a fight with my mom. He'd mow the lawn. Wash the car. Buy her tulips. He'd do things. Never talk. Never say sorry. But I could see it in his eyes, the guilt, the need, the fear of being truly confronted. Sam looked like that when he left the room. And just like when I was 10 years old, watching my father fumble through a performance of Repair, I knew this wasn't about the shirt. Or the sex. Or even the silence. It was about not knowing how to reach someone you love, and watching them drift anyway. I used to love how much Sam touched me. The spontaneous hand-holding. His palm on the small of my back in grocery store aisles. That thing he did when I walked past him in the kitchen, a gentle smack on my butt, followed by a wink and a grin that always made me feel like I was still the girl he fell for. Now, I brace for it. Last Sunday, we were chopping vegetables for dinner, something simple, just the two of us, music low in the background. I was slicing carrots when he came up behind me, slipped his hands around my waist, and rested his chin on my shoulder. It should have been sweet. Familiar. But my shoulders tightened without warning. "You smell good," he murmured into my neck. I didn't answer. He kissed the spot just below my ear, soft, slow, like he thought he could warm me back into softness. I tried to focus on the carrot in my hand, on the music, on anything that might anchor me to the moment. But I felt like I was watching myself from above, this woman being touched by a man she still technically loved, and not knowing what to do with that. He didn't notice. Or maybe he chose not to. His hands started to drift lower. His hips pressed lightly into mine. I stepped forward. Quick. Just enough to make it awkward. "Can you grab the olive oil?" I said, too casually, not turning around. He hesitated. "Hannah," I turned to face him. "What?" "Nothing." He forced a smile, opened the cabinet. You've been off lately." "I'm tired." "You're always tired." And there it was, the barb, disguised as a joke. I watched him pour oil into the pan like it didn't matter. Like that tiny cut wasn't already adding to 1,000 others just beneath my skin. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Stirred the onions. Later that night, we lay in bed. He scooted closer, draping his arm over my waist, his hand resting on my stomach. I lay still, eyes open in the dark. His breath was warm on my shoulder. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded, even though I wasn't. He kissed my neck again, then my shoulder, then started to roll toward me more purposefully. And I froze. I wanted to want it. I wanted to turn toward him, to let the weight of his body on mine remind me of something solid and real. But all I could think about was how we never talked about why I was distant. Why I was sad. Why I was slowly untethering. I forced a small laugh, turned onto my side. "Not tonight." He was quiet for a second. Then, "Right." And I hated how disappointed he sounded. Not because he felt rejected, but because I felt guilty for a need I couldn't meet. Like my body had become this object I owed him, and I was withholding it for reasons I couldn't even name clearly. I stared at the wall and felt him shift away. In the silence, I thought of my mom again. The way she used to sit at the edge of their bed, brushing her hair in the mirror, looking almost haunted by the weight of pretending. How she once told me, years after the divorce, he always wanted me, but he never saw me. That sentence has lived in me like a prophecy. Now here I am, in a bed that feels too small and too wide at the same time, with a man who keeps trying to reach me through skin, when what I really need is to be heard. I closed my eyes, curled into myself, and the thought came uninvited but crystal clear: why does everything have to turn into sex? It happened during dinner with friends. Of all places, around a table, half lit by patio string lights, with grilled chicken on our plates and the hum of summer cicadas in the air. It was supposed to be a light evening. Some wine. Laughter. Normalcy. Sam was in his element. He told a story about one of his students who had confused the Civil War with World War II, and everyone laughed. His hand found my knee under the table, gave it a quick squeeze, like a reflex. A gesture of connection. Maybe even pride. I smiled tightly. Drank my wine. Then Amanda, our friend from down the street, asked how long we'd been married. 10 years, Sam answered, glancing at me. 13 together. She stuck with me. Another laugh around the table. Someone asked, "What's the secret?" I felt my throat tighten. I looked at Sam. He was smiling like this was the easiest question in the world. Patience, he said, chuckling. And regular sex. Laughter again. I tried to laugh, too. I really did. But something in me cracked. I opened my mouth and heard myself say, "That's not exactly working for us lately, is it?" The table went quiet. A sharp, awkward hush, like a record scratching mid-song. Sam blinked. What? I regretted it immediately. I looked down at my plate, cheeks burning. Forget it. It was a joke. But it wasn't. And he knew it. He stared at me for a beat longer, then gave a tight smile to the group. Well, we'll save that discussion for therapy. The table laughed again, nervously this time. The conversation moved on. But we both felt the fracture like a hairline crack in glass, invisible to others, but widening by the second. Back home, I started loading the dishwasher in silence. Sam stood in the doorway, arms crossed. What the hell was that? I didn't turn around. It just slipped out. No, Hannah. That wasn't a slip. That was a dig. In front of our friends. I don't know what you want me to say. My voice was already trembling, and I hated that. Hated how emotional I always sounded when I tried to explain myself. Like it discounted what I was saying. How about starting with what's actually going on? Because if I'm such a disappointment in bed, maybe you should have told me instead of a dinner party. I turned to him, finally. That's not what I meant. You've been pulling away for months. You never talk to me. You flinch when I touch you, because I feel like that's the only thing you want from me, Sam. My voice cracked, louder than I intended. I saw him flinch. I kept going, too fast, too breathless. You don't ask how I'm feeling. You don't notice when I'm off. You just kiss me, or grab me, or try to make it better with your hands like that's enough. I love you, he said, his voice raised now too. I'm trying. You're the one shutting me out. I laughed bitterly. No. I've been begging for something deeper and quieter and real, and you just keep trying to fix it with sex and coffee and hugs that feel like band-aids. He stood there, breathing hard. So what now? You don't love me? I looked at him, and what broke me wasn't anger. It was the look in his eyes. That mix of desperation and confusion. Like I'd become a stranger to him. I do, I whispered. But I don't think you see me anymore. And I don't know how long I've been pretending that's okay. He left the room without saying another word. I sank to the floor, my back against the cabinets, and cried. Ugly, full-body sobs. The kind that feel like they've been sitting in your chest for years, waiting for the right crack to escape through. I covered my mouth, afraid he'd hear. Afraid he wouldn't care if he did. And then came the worst part, the shame. Shame that I'd said it in public. Shame that I'd made it real. Shame that I'd hurt the person I still loved, even if I didn't know how to reach him anymore. I sat there, wiping my tears with a dish towel, trying to understand how we got here. And all I could think was, we never said it outright, but we both know what's happening. Just like my parents. Just like my dad and me. The days after the dinner party bled together like a watercolor left out in the rain, all blurred edges and faint shapes of what used to be. We moved through the house like coworkers on opposite shifts. He'd make coffee in the morning, pour me a cup out of habit, then leave it on the counter without a word. I'd find it lukewarm an hour later, untouched, and feel a pang that was equal parts regret and resignation. He stopped touching me. That was the first thing I noticed. No hand at the small of my back. No absent-minded shoulder squeeze. No kisses in passing. And I missed it, even though I'd pushed it away for months. I missed him, even as I stood there unable to say so. Some nights, I heard him playing guitar in the garage, old songs, half-remembered lyrics. Sometimes he sang softly, Sometimes he didn't. But I'd sit at the top of the stairs, listening like a stranger pressed to a hotel wall. He was still Sam. Still the man who organized my spice rack alphabetically and couldn't keep houseplants alive. Still the one who rubbed his temples when he was grading too many papers and played trivia podcasts on speaker in the shower. But he wasn't reaching for me anymore. And I didn't know how to say I missed it. Not just the affection, but the intimacy beneath it. The unspoken comfort of being known. He'd started going to bed before me. I'd find him turned away, curled on his side like a comma. I never knew if he was actually asleep. I didn't ask. One night, I stood in the doorway and watched him breathing quietly, shirtless, the curve of his spine familiar and distant all at once. I wanted to slip in beside him. To rest my hand on his chest and feel the rhythm of his heart beneath my palm. But something stopped me. Fear, maybe. Pride. Or just not knowing what version of myself I'd bring with me if I did. He wasn't cold to me. He wasn't cruel. He still texted to ask if I wanted anything from the store. He still cleared snow off my windshield in the mornings. But we hadn't laughed in weeks. We hadn't fought either, and somehow that felt worse. The silence between us had changed shape. It was no longer full of tension or frustration. It was quieter now. Polite. Like we were learning to live without the parts of us that used to ache for each other. I sat on the couch one night, watching some dumb reality show with my laptop open, when I saw an old photo in the corner of the screen, one of those automated memories. It was us, 5 years ago, at a cabin in Vermont. Sam had his arms around me, both of us in sweaters and wool socks, wine glasses in hand. I was leaning into him, smiling wide, a little flushed. And all I could think was, I miss that woman. Not just him. Her. The version of me who felt held, not just physically, but emotionally. Who felt safe. I closed the laptop and stared into the dark. The truth I'd been circling around for weeks finally landed, sharp and clear. I didn't want to live like this. I didn't want to be like my parents, two people who loved each other in a quiet, buried way that never made it to the surface. But I also didn't know if I had the courage to dig us out. I stood up, padded down the hall, and paused outside our bedroom door. His light was off. The faint sound of his breathing, steady. I didn't go in. Not yet. But for the first time in a long while, I knew I had to choose, not just between staying or leaving, but between hiding and showing up. Even if it was messy. Even if it hurt. Because if I didn't, we'd keep fading. Quietly. Kindly. Like two people who used to love each other too much to say the truth out loud. It was a Wednesday when the rupture became real. I came home late, a staff meeting that ran long, a grocery stop I didn't really need to make. I think I just wanted to delay walking through the door of a house that felt more like a waiting room. The lights were off except the kitchen one. Sam was sitting at the table, half turned toward the window. He didn't look up when I came in. But he spoke. I think we should talk. My heart thudded. I nodded. Yeah. I know. I sat across from him, unzipped my coat but didn't take it off. He was holding a mug, something herbal probably. He'd stopped drinking coffee after 3 p.m. years ago. He looked tired. Not just end of the day tired, but heavy. I don't know what to do anymore, he said softly. I swallowed. Me neither. A long pause stretched between us. He finally looked at me. Do you still want this? The question should have felt sharper, but it landed like a whisper. I want what we had, I said. But I don't think we can go back. We can't. He nodded once, like he'd already grieved that part. But I was hoping we could find something new. Together. That broke something in me. Because he wasn't asking me to be who I used to be. He was asking if we could survive as we are now. wounded. Changed. Still trying. I miss you, I whispered. His eyes softened. I miss you too. And just like that, the silence cracked. We sat for a long time, not fixing anything, just naming the things we'd both been too afraid to say. He told me he'd felt unwanted for months, like every touch had become a risk. I told him I didn't know how to feel close when I felt unseen. We talked about the ways we'd stopped reaching, the ways we'd started pretending. The fear that honesty would ruin us, when, really, the silence already had. He didn't touch me right away. That part mattered. But when I stood to leave the kitchen, he followed. And in the hallway, just before I reached our bedroom, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. No heat. No pressure. Just warmth. I leaned into it. His chin rested on my shoulder, and we stayed like that, barely breathing, like movement might break the fragile peace between us. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something. And I thought again of my dad, the way he sat across from my mother for decades, both of them quietly hurting, neither of them brave enough to say what they knew deep down: this isn't working. We're not reaching each other anymore. I used to wonder if he ever regretted not saying it out loud. Now I think I understand. Silence protects you, but it also starves you. So when Sam whispered, "Come to bed?" I said yes. Not because everything was fixed, but because I wanted to stop disappearing. You know what no one tells you? That losing the spark isn't sudden. It doesn't explode. It drips. A little less laughter. A missed glance. A kiss that doesn't land the same. Then one day you're lying next to someone you love, still love, and you feel a mile away from them. That's what happened to us. And for a long time, I thought it meant something was broken beyond repair. That we'd failed. That we were becoming them. My parents. See, growing up, I watched my mom fold laundry in silence while my dad read the paper. I watched dinners pass with no conversation, only the scraping of forks on plates. They stayed married, technically. But they were roommates. They coexisted. And when I was 12, I found out, accidentally, that my dad had been unfaithful. Not in the messy, cinematic way. Quietly. Cleanly. Like someone slipping out of a room without shutting the door behind them. And my mom knew. She never said it, but I saw it in the way she stared at him sometimes. As if she was speaking in a language he refused to hear. They never talked about it. Not to each other. Not to me. But I knew. So when things started to crack between Sam and me, I panicked. I started shrinking the way my mother did. Smiling through it. Pretending. Avoiding confrontation. I thought if I ignored the ache, it might go away. Or at least stay small enough to hide. But pain doesn't shrink. It expands. I confused affection with expectation. I mistook sex for love. I waited for him to read my mind while I was busy reading his silences. And we both, quietly, unknowingly, began to disappear from the relationship. But here's what I've learned: love is not mind reading. It's not assumption. It's not an instinct that magically survives the wear of years and life and routine. It's a practice. And intimacy? Intimacy is not sex. It's sitting across from someone who knows the worst version of you and choosing to stay anyway. It's awkward conversations and uncomfortable honesty. It's the moment you say, "I'm lonely," even when you're afraid they'll be offended. It's letting yourself be seen before you're perfect. We talked, Sam and I. We started asking the hard questions. We stopped skipping over the pauses. We let them breathe. We sat in the discomfort. Some nights we touched, others we didn't. And it stopped being a test of whether we were okay and became a process of actually knowing each other again. I'm not going to pretend it was magical. or romantic, or even consistent. But it was real. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was in a relationship with another person, not just a projection of who I hoped they would be. Sometimes, that's the work. You peel away the roles, husband, wife, lover, provider, and what's left is two humans, vulnerable and unfinished. That's where we started again. And if we fail, because we might, I'll know we tried. Not just to survive, but to show up fully. To stop being ghosts in each other's lives. I think about my dad a lot now. About the silence he chose. The apology he never gave. The heartbreak he never named. And I wonder if he thought protecting his image was more important than healing the wound. Or maybe he just didn't know how to say it out loud. And maybe that's the difference between us. I'm not afraid to name it. To say, I pulled away. I was scared. I felt unseen. I wanted more and didn't know how to ask. I want love that sees all of me, not just the version I package nicely. And I want to love someone in their mess, too. So if you're in that place, the quiet place where affection has turned mechanical and every kiss feels like pressure, don't wait for them to guess. Say it. Even if your voice shakes. Even if they can't meet you right away. Because silence may keep things peaceful. But it also keeps them shallow. And I don't want shallow.